I think that Australia is strategically essential to any power which wishes to control the Eastern Indian Ocean, the Southern Ocean and the Western Pacific Ocean. Because you see we're an enormous stable aircraft carrier at the pivot of the three oceans, and also pointing to the Southeast Asian archipelago. Secondly, in terms of our raw material resources, we are in a most enviable situation. We're probably one of the richest two continents in the world. Now, I don't believe that a population of 15 million people, which will, by the end of the century, will be something like 17 million people, is going to be allowed to monopolise that and not to produce, as we're not producing. And so I am quite certain that there will be some foreign threat, which may be military, but doesn't have to be military, to Australia.
And from the analysis of who the new right is and what they're saying, we turn to the more important questions of this program. Why is there this reawakening now? And is it in some way related to technological change, the technological revolution? These questions are the guts of this program. They're the questions I was most trying to answer when I set out to make the program. Yet when I come to review what I've got, the people I've spoken to haven't answered it, or at least in the terms that I wanted it answered anyway. The answers to the questions must probably remain open. But I think it's still important to have a look at what the new right says about it. They raise further fundamental problems that our post-industrial society must try to answer. Leo, why is there this new interest in liberal and conservative political philosophy at this time?
Because I think we've had the best part of 30 years serious trial of the socialist liberal mix, and really the lesson of the 50s or certainly the 60s and the 70s is it doesn't work.
The reason I can see significant economic difficulties appearing is because of the long-term consequences of the policies that were followed in the past. Policies that were intended to produce the maximum employment within the shortest period of time and to try and maintain this maximum of employment. Now, the man who was chiefly responsible for getting such a view adopted, Keynes, explicitly denied any interest in the long term. He said in the long term we are all dead. Now, unfortunately, some of us might die, but the rest of us have to continue on. And the long-term consequences don't go away simply because one isn't interested in them. The long-term consequences of simply looking at the total volume of employment is that the pattern of employment then becomes more and more difficult to sustain. People are drawn into lines of employment that cannot be maintained for a long period of time, and the wrong sort of information is fed through the price system.
The record of government is shocking, and so I think this pragmatic fact is forcing an increasing number of people to be sceptical about big government, the growth of bureaucracy and the corporate state. And I think that's it doesn't work. It's as simple as that, and that's why people are questioning big government more than ever before.
There is a motivation coming from some young groups in particular based on questions of rights of the individual, and these people are very religious about their views, if you like, or evangelistic.
Well, libertarians have got several ideas about why things are happening right now. I tend to favour the view that since the Second World War at least, we've seen the massive rise in the size of the state, in its powers. America has taken over the colonial heritage of England and France. Russia has risen to become a superpower. There have been massive numbers of third world revolutions. And I think old Ludwig von Mises, the great classical liberal economist, summed it up when he said that the rise of the state is essentially a parasitical thing. It has to feed off the productive efforts of the mass of the people. And it can only do this whilst there is wealth in the community to tap into. And one of the consequences of this, of decades of taxing, inflating and controlling people, he called it the reserve fund. Now the fat in society has been eaten away until such a stage has been reached where every time the government does something, the effect is immediately felt, and the effects are coming on one after the other. And people are suddenly realising that when the government does something, there are bad consequences. For example, the energy crisis, inflation, unemployment, recession, are all problems that are suddenly bunching up in the 70s. And I think people are suddenly realising that there is a fundamental crisis and are responding to it by protesting, by organising, by discussing new ideas and issues.
Then there are the pragmatists who say, oh look, you know, we thought this could work but it hasn't happened, so maybe this is better. Well, let's try that. Now, to me, there seems to be not the same sort of depth of intellectual commitment or philosophical commitment to this, but at least there is a change.
I think that while Friedmanite economics, voucher systems, reverse income tax originated with those who are wrongly labelled as right, but nevertheless labelled as right, I do see quite a number of people really from an original left-wing source coming to them because they now have become frightened of the state. Not that the state is going to run concentration camps. They hadn't seen 1990 before, but they just are fed up with the idea that a bureaucracy in Canberra, which is a caste, you know, not a class, but a caste, child ultimately succeeding father, which have got 40%, have organised for themselves a 40% higher average weekly family income than anybody else in Australia, which have organised for themselves a system of superannuation, which is guaranteed against inflation, that these people, not governments whom they elect, should have the final determination over the lives of human beings. And so what they're saying is, let the state collect the money and increasingly let it dispense the money to people so that they can make their own choices. And I think all of that is good. But not on a purely individualist basis, the family, because every individual needs a social support.
What will probably happen is a transference of attention from the primary industries, which have become far more machinery intensive, from secondary industries, which also have become far more machinery intensive, to the tertiary sector of services and so on and so on and so on. Now, of course, if the society isn't creating the wealth in the other two sectors, the tertiary sector, which is sort of services the other two, certainly won't be able to grow.
If wage rates don't reflect the need for those, the need to make those changes, then how will the workers know what industries to move into? And that's one of the rigidities that minimum wages and unionisation and arbitration builds into the economy. People cannot respond to those changes because the market rates, wage rates, do not exist.
What we have to do is to remove the strictures on the society that impede the sort of social changes that go along with it.